next project in this video. So how do we take a technology that's fundamentally designed to handle peer-to-peer connections and go beyond that? Well, it turns out there's actually 3 different approaches to solve this exact issue, so let's go ahead and go over them. The first approach we have is called a mesh network, and with a mesh network, we are creating a network of peers that will all maintain a peer-to-peer connection with every other peer inside of a group video call. So let's say we have a call with 5 peers. Well, peer 1 will have to create a peer-to-peer connection to peer 2, then to peer 3, 4, and 5, and all the other peers in the network will have to create that same connection with every other peer inside of that network. So it kind of meshes them together, and this will happen for every other peer that has to join after this. So every new peer that joins will have to create this connection, and all the other peers will have to connect back to this peer. So every single time a new peer joins, we now have to maintain a new connection, and this technically does accomplish what we need here, but this approach has a massive downside and does not scale at all. The problem here is that every single time a new peer joins, we now have to upload our stream and maintain that connection. So this requires a lot of upload bandwidth, so once you go beyond 4 to 5 peers, you're going to start seeing a lot of issues here, so this approach is not recommended if you're looking to scale. Now, the second approach we're going to talk about is less of a peer-to-peer architecture and more of a peer-to-server architecture, and that is the MCU approach, which stands for multi-conferencing unit. So how this works is now each peer will be connected to the server, and unlike the mesh network, we're going to upload our stream to that server, and that server will take in all the incoming streams, process them, mix them together, and then send them back to the peers. Now, the upside to this is that it does scale better and you only have to upload your stream once. The downside is that that server that you're going to send this to has to be very beefy. It has to process all of this, so it could get very expensive to actually handle this. So it scales better, but the downside is that it's going to be more expensive. For the third and final approach, we have the SFU method, which stands for Selecting Forwarding Unit. And this is very similar to the MCU approach in the sense that we still have a peer-to-server architecture and we're still only uploading our stream once to that server. Now, where this differs from the MCU approach is that we're no longer going to mix those streams together and process them. The server will now act as a router and simply just make sure that we get all of our peers' streams and that all of our peers get our stream. So it's simply going to direct traffic, and that's all it's doing. So the benefit to this is that because we're no longer mixing and processing all those streams, we now don't need such a beefy server, and it's going to be a lot less expensive. Now, while this approach does have a lot of benefits to it, one thing to be mindful of is that we're still only uploading one stream, but we are now having to download multiple streams. So if we start having a group video call with maybe 20, 30, 40 people, you do have to be mindful of people's download speed. Most people nowadays would probably be fine with this, but it's just something to consider is the fact that you do need download speed in order to start downloading all those streams. So the benefit that the MCU approach has is that users only need to upload once and download once. With the SFU method, they upload once and then download multiple times. Now, in part 2 of this video, we are going to be creating a group video call and application, but instead of using one of the 3 approaches that I talked about, we're going to go another route, and we're just going to use a third-party service. So anytime you're building out an application like this, you have to decide, do I want to build all this out by myself? Do I want to set up that infrastructure and deal with scaling this application? Or is there a third-party service that can make my life a lot easier? So the trade-offs is that usually a third-party service is going to cost you some money, but that can also save you money down the line if you're having to still pay engineers or spend time on building this out. So I wanted to make sure that you can see both approaches, make that decision for yourself. And if you're going to follow along for the next project, go ahead and stick around, and I'll see you in part 2. Hey, welcome to part 2 of this video. I have no way of knowing if you just skipped ahead to this part or if you followed all the way along up until this point, but either way, this is a great place to start for project number 2. And with that being said, let's go ahead and do a full walkthrough of the project. I'll show you where to get the source code, and we're just going to start coding this up. So if you want to get the source code for the project, there will be a link in the video description. Go ahead and download this. I'll add in instructions on how to actually get started. There's also a starter template here. We're going to cover this, and that's all down in the description. So this is our project, and a little backstory behind this is I actually ran a open source project for a project called Mumble, and it was a social network that we built out. And after about 20 days and 500 plus PRs, it just got way too overwhelming to manage it, so I just kind of let it go. But I did want to keep the name because I love the logo, love the name. So I decided to make this like a version of Mumble. So that's going to be the name of our project here. And that logo and all that's going to be also in the source code. So right away, when we join this website, we're going to see, or when we join a room, we're going to see a Mumble bot send us a message, and it's always going to welcome us to the room here. So we have a chat room right here. I can say, hey, and then hi. That's all real time. And any other user in this room will actually see this. And I also see my name right here. Now, if I actually want to share my screen, I can go ahead and toggle this right here. Select the screen I want to share. I have two screens. Let's say I'm teaching someone a code or I'm doing a tutorial. We can actually go through and share everything that we have. So if another user wants to join this room, what we're going to do is go ahead and copy and paste this link right here. And immediately, if they don't have a name, it's going to redirect them to the lobby. So let's say user number 2 is Paul, and the room name is 1. So we see Dennis in the room as a participant. And when Paul joins the room, immediately Paul is going to see Dennis's stream. So if Paul wants to put Dennis's stream into focus, all he has to do is click on this, and this will expand it into focus, and we can always toggle it, just keep changing that, and it's just going to adjust our actual video frames and basically change what's in focus. So let me actually hide this. So when Paul joins, we see welcome Paul, and now we see 2 participants here. So Paul will not see any messages that were in the room prior to his stream or him joining the room. And if we go back to this room, Dennis is going to see that Paul has joined the room. So if Paul actually wants to join as a presenter here, we're not going to deal with invites. Maybe in the live demo, we'll actually add this. But at this point, anybody can join the room. So if Paul joins, now this is Paul's stream. So if Paul wants to show his face in the frame here, we can toggle back and forth here. And if we go back to Dennis's screen, Dennis can also toggle back and forth. So Dennis can now see Paul. Now, if Paul leaves the room, we can go ahead and just leave like that by closing this out. We'll actually get an alert that Paul has left the room. So that's the core functionality. We just have participants. We have full capability of toggling the mic, toggling screen sharing, changing up our video frame. And actually one thing is when you actually go from sharing your screen back to presenting, I made sure that your mic is muted and that your camera is muted. I don't know, I just thought of this funny situation that if you were sharing your screen, but maybe you had someone in the room with you and then you went back to just turning off your screen sharing and your camera turns back on, that might be a little bit awkward. It just might create a funny situation. So you'll actually have to toggle your camera. I'll just show you that one more time. So for sharing, and then we go back to here. So we toggle the camera or screen sharing off. Camera starts as off and so does the mic. So a little warning there, anybody can create a room. And again, the messages are in real time. So if I message something right here, everybody in the room will actually see the message. So source code, live demo, and with that being said, let's go ahead and close out this demo and let's get started. Okay, so to get started with this project, we're going to want to download the initial project files, get that starter template, and then we'll just start building on top of this. So this GitHub repo is linked up in the video description. Go ahead and clone it or download it from here. We'll download it as a zip file in this case, and we're going to want this starter template right here. So this is the code for the entire project. Specifically though, we want this starter template, and this is what we're going to build on top of. So let's go ahead and drag this into our desktop, and I'm going to close out the GitHub repo and we'll open up this folder, and specifically I want this starter template, so we'll bring this out here. And at this point, I'm just going to delete the zip folder because I don't need it. If you want to actually test it out, get that project up and running, you can go ahead and do that, but I'll just remove that, and let's just rename this to Mumble 2. Okay, so I'm going to open this up in VS Code, whatever you want to use as your text editor, that's your choice. I'm going to use VS Code because I like live server. So let's go ahead and open this up, and we'll just check out what this project looks like, and we'll recap the files that are in here right now. So the first file I want to look at is going to be room.html. I'm going to open this up in live server because I first want to see the output, and then we'll actually take a look at the code here. So we have a header bar right here, a sidebar for the chat, some stream controls, and participants on the left. Now, if we go to create room, we have a lobby.html page, and this is simply a form with a form to enter your username, the room name, and then an actual button to go to that room. So not much of a template. There's just some functionality added here. So let's go ahead and actually go back to the room. So we'll go back to room.html and let's take a look at some of the JavaScript that was added here. So we do have responsiveness right here. If we move that in, our participants can be opened up by toggling this right here, and then we can also toggle the chat by clicking this right here. So we're actually going to build in this section in the middle right here for the actual stream right here. This is something that we're going to take care of and actually hand code out. I just left it empty for now, but that's what this looks like right here. Pretty simple template. So we'll just review some of the code here and actually take a look at the IDs and classes that we're using and how all this was done. So let's go ahead and start with room.html. I'll try to zoom out a little bit here so we can see that we have our header bar right here that's repeated on both pages right here. Not much to it. We're not really going to mess with this section. We can actually leave it alone. If we go down to our container, we have a room container that encapsulates the entire room. And we have a section for our members right here. So this members container actually goes down pretty far. If you can see this line right here, it actually goes down pretty far with the demo users that we currently have in here. And if I minimize this, let's go ahead and minimize just this section right here. So we have the members container, and right after the members container, we actually have the stream container. So this is that middle section right here. So this is that stream container. Let's just see what we have in here. So we have some buttons. We have the stream actions with buttons right here. We have SVGs for the actual icons. We can minimize those stream actions. We'll minimize the stream container. And then we have our messages container right here. So that's an ID that wraps the actual messages, and then each message uses the class of message wrapper. So if I scroll down, we're going to see a lot of repeated messages. Eventually, we're going to get rid of all this dummy code here. At least this stuff right here, this will be auto-generated when users type in a message. But if I minimize that, there we go. That closes this section out, and here's the entire page here. So our navigation bar, main container, room container, we have a members container, stream container, and messages. So left side, middle, and right. So if we go to the lobby, let's go ahead and check this out. I'll minimize the head tag right here. And in here, we have our navigation. Let's go ahead and actually fix that. I don't want to delete something and screw something up right away. So we'll minimize the header. Then we have our main container, which is the room lobby container. Here we have a form container, which is going to make up this section right here that actually contains the entire form. There's some styling there. And if we minimize this section, I guess I don't need to minimize it. So that's our header. And then we actually have the actual form. So lobby forms, the class, we have our field wrappers, and then the actual input fields. So not much to the template right there. We just have some styling that's in styles.css. We have a main.css file. This is going to be the entire template code. We're not going to mess with this at all, actually. This is just our base code and our navigation bar. Basically any code that's repeated. Now, any code that's associated with the lobby and room, let's go ahead and just save those. I hope I didn't delete anything. Inside of the room right here, this is any code to the actual room. Here we have the styling for our members, the participants, the messages, all that sort of stuff here. And inside of lobby.css, our form container, and so on. Now, I mentioned JavaScript here, so we do have a little bit of JavaScript for our room and our lobby. So inside of our room, we need to make sure that messages as they're added are always placed at the bottom here. So we did add a little bit of JavaScript to actually make sure that when someone types, this scroll bar automatically goes to the bottom. So we want to see the latest message here. So here we have some functionality that actually scrolls and make sure that the message is at the bottom. And let's see, let's just kind of go over the chat container. Here we have the functionality to open and close that chat container, and then also for the participants right here. So the members container, this is that functionality for that responsiveness. We added something that can toggle this and make sure that it opens and closes. So that's really the entire template right here. You can kind of go through that, familiarize yourself with everything. Not much that we're going to do here. In fact, we won't touch this at all. And any code that's currently in here, we're not going to modify anything. We're just going to simply add to it. So let's just go ahead and get started. And what I want to do is go into the room.html page. And I want to start by making a container for our video frames and then the actual large display. That's going to be the frame that takes up that focus of the entire page. So all the streams will sit inside of this section right here. So stream container. Let's go ahead and open this up. We'll minimize this. And then let's just go ahead and add this just above stream actions. So we have our controls on the bottom. I'm also going to minimize those right there. We'll create some space here, and we're going to create a div, and this div is going to have the ID of streams underscore container, or double underscore, so make sure there's 2 underscores right there. And inside of this section, we're going to create another div, and these will be the actual circles that you'll see. So each circle is going to have a video double underscore container class. Okay, so we have a video container class, and then the actual containers themselves will have IDs. This will be how we know which container is associated with which user and when to actually add in a video frame. So we need a way to actually identify them. So for now, let's go ahead and give each user an ID. We'll just do user-container, and this user will have the ID of 1. So later on, this will be dynamic, but for now, we'll just do 1, and then we'll just increment those. So we have the actual container. Now we're going to add in a video element here later, but for now, let's just add in an h1 tag so we can actually see it, and then we'll just go ahead and throw in the number 1. So let's go ahead and create some space here. And what I'm going to do here is copy each container, and I'll just duplicate this a few times. So let's just go ahead and copy and paste a few, change the ID to 2, the actual value to 2 here, and then we'll do 3, 3, and 4. So we're going to go ahead and style this so we can see it. And here we go. We have our stream container or streams container, and then the actual video container. Now above this, whenever we click on one of these streams right here, just like I showed in the demo, we're actually going to take that video stream and then present it into the big container. So let's say someone's sharing their screen, or you want to put focus on someone. This is going to be that section where we actually add them in and display them in a larger frame. So let's go ahead and create the div here, and this ID will just be stream. Whoops, made this outside of the quotes here. We'll do stream double underscore box like that. Okay, so that's all we need for this section. Let's go ahead and just check this out. Let's display it, and here we go. We have some elements here. We don't see much here, so let's go ahead and just style that. So we'll go into our room.css file. So inside of styles, we'll go to room.css, and let's just go ahead and find where we want to put this. So I want to put this underneath the stream container section to kind of keep that hierarchy. So we have the main container, and we'll just add the styling here. So we have an ID there, so we'll just do stream double underscore box. And in this section, at this point, let's just go ahead and add in some background color so we can see it. And for the color, I'll just pick one of these, I guess. Let's just go ahead and grab that color, and let's just set a height of 60 viewport height. Okay, so let's just take a look. Here we go. So that's going to represent that big frame right there. And then we actually want to style these video containers. So let's go ahead and underneath here, let's just grab the video double underscore container section. A little bit slow there. Okay, so we have the video container. We have the actual circles here. Let's grab that, and let's go ahead and start styling this. So the first thing is I have that number inside of them. So let's just go ahead and make sure that's centered. So we'll do display flex, and let's just go ahead and to justify content. We want to make sure it's centered. This is technically not really relevant to what we're doing, but let's just go ahead and center it so even the demo looks good. Align items. Let's center this horizontally and vertically. And then for the actual item, let's go ahead and set a border. We'll set this to 2 pixels, solid. And then I have a shade of purple that I want to use. It's going to be a hex, and this is going to be B366F9. So that should give us a purple shade right there. Okay, so we should see it output. Let's just make sure it's connected. Here we go. So they're not circles yet, but we'll fix that. Now underneath here, let's go ahead and make that a circle. We'll just do border dash radius, and we'll set that to 50%. That'll give us a circle. And then underneath that, let's go ahead and do cursor pointer. So we want to make sure users do know that they can click on that to expand it. So we want to make sure it's clickable, and that will visually show someone that that is. And then after that, let's just go ahead and set overflow to none, or let's just do hidden. So the video frame itself will be a square, and we want to make sure it doesn't actually overflow from this container. So we want to make sure anything that overflows just gets cut out. And let's just finally end this with a height of 300 pixels and a width of 300 pixels. And we'll make sure this is responsive too. Okay, so we have a height and width here, and here we go. We have our circles. So now we want to style that container and actually put these in line so they're actually correctly placed inside of that frame. So I'm a little bit zoomed in, so that's why it looks funny. Normally on a screen, you'd see it maybe around this width right here, but because I'm so zoomed in, it's going to look like they're being crushed down. So what I might have to do is make those responsive a little bit sooner than I planned. So let's just go ahead and start with the container, and we'll just see how that looks. So now we want to style this actual streams container that holds all those circles. So we'll just do streams _container. And let's first display it as flex. I want to make sure it's a flex, and then we'll do flex wrap. So whenever it starts collapsing in on the circles, they actually go down and actually wrap the element. So we'll do flex wrap, set that to wrap, justify content. Let's just set that to center, and align items. Let's also center that. Let's see, why do I have space here? Okay, so I do want to set a margin at the top. Let's just go ahead and give some space. So margin top, let's set that to 25 pixels. And then margin bottom, the reason I want to set some margin at the bottom, we'll actually do 225 pixels. The reason why I want to do this is that if we start zooming in, or let's say we get a lot of frames, if someone scrolls to the bottom, if we have no margin here, the buttons will actually cover that person's video frame. So we just want to make sure that we actually have some space here. So that's why I added that. Now I should actually add in a gap here. So let's do that too. So let's just do gap, create some space between the users, set that to 2 EM, and there we go. Okay, so it gets crushed down here. I want to make sure this is responsive. So this is what it would actually look like right here. The demo always looks funnier when I'm videotaping. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually update this. So let's see, the video container, let's create our own media query right here. So let's just copy and paste that, and I'm going to set this at 1400 pixels. So what I'm going to do is grab this video container, copy and paste that in because I'm too lazy to type it out, and let's just update the height and width. So whenever we're at 1400 pixels, we'll set that to 200 pixels in width for the video container. And then let's just go ahead and copy this again. And then at around 768 pixels, I just want to go ahead and make these 100 pixels in height and width. Okay, so let's check this responsiveness out. So if I start crushing that down, there we go. It starts shrinking, and then they just slowly adjust based on whatever the current width is. So I'll just keep the zoom at about right here. I think that's a good size. If anything, I'll just reduce them down to 200 pixels permanently, and we'll leave those at least for this video. Okay, so now that we have our template ready, it's time to move on to displaying our video stream to the page and also connecting to other members inside of this video chat application. So we want to see our own face on here and our peers. So let's talk about how we're going to do this. So in the first part of this video, if you built out that WebRTC peer-to-peer chat application, I talked about how we can scale WebRTC to group video calling as opposed to just peer-to-peer. And I mentioned the three main approaches, and we have the mesh network that we can build out that has a lot of cons. It's very limited. And we also have the SFU method and MCU method. Now, instead of going into all of that and building out our entire network, what we're going to do is use a third-party service called Agora that builds on top of WebRTC, and Agora provides us with a lot of functionality to actually build out and scale our applications. So with Agora, we're going to create an account, download an SDK, and then just use the Agora SDK to build all the video part of this application out, along with the real-time messaging. So this chat box, participants, that's all going to be real-time using Agora. So Agora is a paid service. They do have a free tier to it. We have up to 10,000 free minutes that we can use when we get started. So that should be plenty for this video to actually build out your demo. So let's go ahead and get started. You don't need a credit card on file. So we'll just go ahead and get started with Agora, and I'll just teach along the way. So let's go ahead and go to agora.io. The first thing we're going to want to do is create an account. So do that. We're going to create an app on Agora and then download and connect the SDK. So let's go ahead and go to login. Once you're logged in and you have an account, you'll have this console right here. And in this console, we have our projects here. So go ahead and go to more, create a new app here. So I already have a few. I'm going to use one of these, but at this point, go ahead and create an app and go ahead and give it the name of something like Mumble 2. For the use case, we'll do social, live stream. I guess we can just do chat room. And then for the authentication mechanism, go ahead and select testing mode app ID. If we select this method right here, that's going to require us to have a token that we have to keep refreshing. So we don't want to deal with that right now. Let's just go ahead and authenticate with only an app ID. So once you have this set up, go ahead and click submit. I'm not going to click this because I already have an app. So go ahead and submit that, and then you're going to see your app right here. So what we're going to need is this app ID. So you can actually click on this, and that'll just go ahead and copy that app ID. So we'll get back to this in a second. So at this point, once you've created your app, go ahead and go back to the main console, and you should see this download section right here. So Agora has two main SDKs. We have, let's see, we'll actually want to select web here. So let's go ahead and do that. Get this out of the way. So Agora has RTC, so that's one of the SDKs that stands for real-time communication, which will give us video and audio. And then we have RTM, which is for real-time messaging. So we'll use that one later, but for now, let's start with video SDK and select 4.x. So there's a 3.x here. We want to make sure we're at 4.x. Go ahead and click on this, go into this section, and we're going to want this file right here. So I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to drag this into my desktop, and then I'll drag it into the Mumble2 folder. So that's the SDK. We're just going to want to go ahead and download that and then connect it. Now, at this point, I'm just going to grab this SDK and drag that into my JavaScript folder. I just wanted to move that in there. I'm kind of doing things manually, but I like to keep it very simple. So if you're more advanced, you can use your more advanced methods, but this way everybody can follow along. So once we have the SDK, let's go ahead and bring that in here. Copy and paste this script tag right here, and we'll want to make sure that we take this Agora SDK. Let's just copy the name and paste this above this room.js script tag. So we'll want to make sure that's above it. And now that we have the SDK, let's go ahead and actually create a JavaScript file specifically for all the logic dealing with Agora. So at this point, inside of the JavaScript file, we're going to call this room_rtc.js. So that's the Agora SDK, that's Agora RTC. So at this point, we're creating a JavaScript file that's going to have all of this logic with Agora. So the first thing we need is our app ID to actually use an app with Agora. So we'll just go ahead and create a variable called app_ID. And in here, we're going to need to get that app ID so we can actually authenticate our user. So back in your console, let's go ahead and actually go to the console itself. So we'll actually go back in here and we'll find our app here. So go back to your projects and go ahead and grab the app ID here that you just created. So go ahead and copy that. I'm obviously going to blur out my app ID because if somebody gets this, they can start using it and then use up all of your minutes. So let's go ahead and copy that app ID. We'll bring that in here, and then I'm going to hide this later, but make sure it's at the top of your page and just paste that in. And that's how we connect the Agora SDK to our project right here along with the app inside of our console. So inside of this room_rtc.js file, let's go ahead and start configuring everything that we need here. So we have our app ID, and at this point, what we need for each user is a UID. So each user has to have some kind of identification here. So what I'll do here is we're going to generate a user if there's not one inside of session storage. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and go into session storage, and we just want to do .get item, and we want to get a value of UID. So at this point, we don't have this user, so we're going to run a check here, and we're just going to say if we don't have a UID, so we're going to use the not operator. Let's go ahead and just generate a UID. So we're going to set this variable right here. So we either have nothing or we're going to create it. And we're just going to do string. So we want it to be a string value. And we're just going to generate a random number between 1 and 10,000. So later on, if you had a full scale application, this could be like a UID in the back end or something that actually connects to your user. So it's more permanent. But at this point, we're just going to generate a number, and I'll leave that other part up to you. And actually, I'm going to have a lot of videos on my channel about how to do this. So just go ahead and check those out, and I'll actually scale this up. So anyways, I'm going on a side tangent. Okay, so we're just going to generate a number between 1 and 10,000. So if we don't have a UID in the session storage, go ahead and generate a UID. And then what we want to do is go ahead and take this newly generated UID, and we're just going to do session storage.set item. So we get an item with get item, and then set it with set item. We have the key and then the actual value, which is going to be the UID. So each user is going to need a UID. This is how we know who's who in a stream. This is how we can identify each other. So once we create a UID, we'll store it in the session storage, and now we don't have to create a new UID every single time a user goes back to the page. So let's go ahead and set a few more values. We also need a token, and in production, this is how you would generally authenticate users with Agora. We have a token that we would actually generate, but for now, because our authentication mechanism was set to app ID only, this is going to make this process a little bit easier so we can focus on the core functionality of Agora and get our application working. And I actually do have a few videos on my channel on how to do this specific thing with the token, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So after our token, we're going to need a client object. At this point, we're just going to set the variable. We'll leave it like this. And the client object will be like that core interface for all the functionality for audio and video streaming. It's going to store all the information about our user and basically any functionality that we need to actually start this video stream with. So we're not going to worry about this until we actually start coding this up. So the next thing I want to do is make sure that we can get a room ID from some kind of URL parameter. So our URL will look like this. It'll be room ID and then room, and then let's say our room name will be some kind of number like that. Let's just do 234. So what we're going to need to do is go to our URL and get this room value and then find out what our room is going to be named. So let's go ahead and get this value. We're going to need to parse that URL. So let's go ahead and first get the URL value. We'll get the query string. We'll do window.location.search. We first want to get this value. Then we want to set the URL parameters value and then get the actual room value out of this. So we'll do URL params, and this will be new URL search params. And we're going to throw in the query string into this. So we have the query string, and then we can actually set the room value by doing room ID is equal to URL params.get. And we're going to look for this room value. So let's just go ahead and pass that in. And this is how we create custom rooms. This is how we can actually have multiple rooms inside of the same app right here. So what I'm going to do at this point is if we don't have a room, so if not room ID, we're going to use a not operator. Typically, we could just redirect our user to the login page. But at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and set a room ID for this purpose. So we're not having to constantly create a room ID in the URL. And we're just going to call it main. So if we don't have an ID in there, we'll just go ahead and call the room main, and that's it. So we'll change this later. Okay, so we have our room ID. We're just setting up some core code here. And what I want to do here is go ahead and set some variables for our local tracks here. So local tracks. This will be our actual audio and video stream. We're going to store this inside of an array here. Now, we also want a place to store remote tracks. So when users join a stream, we want to get their audio and video streams and also store them in a variable here. So we'll do remote users, and this will be an object here. So we'll have like a key value store where we'll have like the user's ID. Let's say the user's ID is 54. And then we'll just have like the audio and video track like this, which will be automatically created for us. So we're not going to worry about that, but this is why we're going to make it an object so it can be key value pairs. Okay, so now that we have the track set up, our room ID and URL set up, let's go ahead and actually get going with having a user join a room and displaying their stream here. So first, let's set up a function called join room init, and let's make sure it's an async function. And in here, we're going to go ahead and make sure this function triggers right away. So on load, we're just going to call join room init, and the user will join the room. So join room init, we're going to create the function, trigger it right away. Now in here, we're going to take that client variable that we just set up right here, and we're just going to go ahead and call Agora RTC.create client. So we're going to use a create client function, and the reason why we have access to this is because of the SDK that we downloaded and added right here. So we're calling Agora.create client, which will create the client object. And in here, we have two required parameters. So first, we have the mode, which can be live or RTC. And this is simply the optimization algorithm to be used. And then we have the codec here, which is simply the encoding method that the browser will use for encoding. So we'll set codec, and this will be VP8. Okay, so first piece of Agora that we use right here are the Agora SDK. And at this point, what I want to do is reference the Agora documentation. And I just want to make sure that you know where to find everything. So from your console or even from the Agora website, we have the documentation here that you can follow. So go ahead and select the platform that you're using or the product. We're using video calling right here. Select the actual platform. So we're using web. And here you have a bunch of documentation along with the API reference here. So here you have it. Again, select the platform. And at this point, we're using video calling. Use the 4x documentation. And go ahead and look at all the methods here. So right now we just called create client. If you have questions, click on it, read about it, and here are going to be all the functions and everything that we're doing here, and this will explain a lot more. So I'll go over what I can and I'll explain the functions as we're using them, but I would highly recommend looking through and actually studying up the details here. So I'm also going to link this up in the video description, so make sure to check that out here. Okay, so let's get back to it. So we created a client object, and what I want to do now with the client is actually join a room. So we're going to go ahead and call await here, and using this client object, we're going to call client.join. So this will actually join a room here. So we need to use some credentials here. So the first thing we need is our app ID. So we set the app ID at the top. Let's go ahead and use that now. Then we want to go ahead and throw in the room ID. So what room do we want to join? And then we want to go ahead and pass in the token. So token at this point is null, so we can leave it just like that. We set the variable right here. So we have the token. And then we want to throw in our UID. So this is how we join with a specific user. So we joined a room and we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and save this and let's just make sure that everything works so far. So I'm going to go ahead and click inspect element. And if you're seeing something like this, it means it's working well. Agora is going to console out a few things for us. So that means we're connected and ready to go. So now that we joined a room, I actually want to display our video stream here. So what I'm going to do is create another function that's actually going to output our stream. So we're going to get our camera feed or camera and audio and then actually display it to the DOM. So underneath here, let's go ahead and create another function. We'll call this join stream. So we joined the room, but now we want to join a stream as like another presenter. So we'll make this an async function and let's just go ahead and continue here. Okay, so we have the join stream function, which will be called on the initial room joining here. So later on, we'll actually join through a button here. We'll actually click a button to join the actual room as a presenter, but we'll call it on load right now. And let's just go ahead and continue here. So when a user wants to join, we first want to go ahead and get our audio and video tracks. Now, I think this should say tracks here. So let's make sure that's plural. Let's add an S. I thought that looked a little bit funny. And let's just go ahead and call await Agora RTC dot create microphone. Gotta type this slowly. So microphone and camera tracks. Okay, kind of a long word there. Okay, so create microphone and camera tracks. So we're going to call this function, and what it's going to do is it's actually going to ask a user, if this is your first time on the site, it's going to ask you for access to your audio and video feed. So make sure you have some kind of webcam added to your laptop, or if you have a desktop, make sure you have a webcam, and this will actually trigger that and request that permission on the first load. So it's going to get your audio and video tracks, add it to local tracks, and this will be stored in an array. So that's why we added it like that. So we're going to get that feed, and then what we want to do is create an actual video player. So we're going to go ahead and do player, and we're going to use backticks here so we can actually add in some dynamic values. And let's just go ahead and grab one of these video containers. So we'll grab this right here, and we're just going to paste that in, and let's just go ahead and format it. So at this point, we don't want the H1 tag in the middle. What we do want to do here, though, is make sure that the ID is based off of our user. So we want to remove the 1, and then we'll just pass in our UID. Now, inside of this div, what we're going to do is go ahead and create another div for the actual video player, and this is where that player will be added. So we're going to create a div here, and this player will have a class of video-player. So we'll do video-player, and then we also want a custom ID. Sorry, my voice squeaked there. We want a custom ID, and we're going to call this user- and then the user's UID. So this way we actually have some unique values that we can actually access. So we're going to create like the container for the video frame. It's not going to be in here just yet. Now, once we create that container where we're going to store this, we want to go ahead and add this video player to this streams container right here. So we'll just do document.get element by ID. We'll get streams underscore container, double underscore, and then we'll just do insert adjacent HTML, and we'll just throw in the player before end, and then we'll actually throw in the player as a second parameter. So that's going to take this player right here that we created and add it to the DOM here. So we're simply going to add it, and once we do that, we want to go ahead and actually play this video stream right here. So we're going to call local tracks, and the audio track is stored in index 0, the video track is stored in index 1. So we're going to get the video track, and we're going to call the play method. And what this play method needs, it's actually going to create like a video tag for us, and it needs a place to append that actual video stream here. So what we're going to do is go ahead and append it to this div right here. So we're going to take this value, so user UID, make sure you're using backticks right here, and we're just going to call play, and that's going to add in that video stream into this video player. So let's go ahead and make sure that this file is linked up here. So let's just take this script tag right here, copy and paste it, and then add in underscore RTC. So we first want to make sure that this file is connected. Let's save that. Let's save this file, and we're going to run into one small issue here. So I want to show you it and then we'll fix that. So let's go ahead and open this up here. So at this point on load, we're going to see our 4 and then our 5th circle once that user joins. So we call this function and we added this player to the DOM, but we're not seeing the video stream here. So one thing also, I guess I wanted to show you something else here. Let's go ahead and actually deny access to our camera feed. So that way you can see what it might look like on the first load here. So let's go ahead and move all these websites out, or we'll just remove those. And then if I refresh this on first load, it's going to ask me for access to my camera. We'll click allow. So if you're doing this for the first time, you'll see that. And here we go. So that actual video element doesn't have a height and width. So we want to make sure it actually fills out that container. So we'll go into our styles, room.css, and let's go up here inside of video container, and let's just go ahead and style this up. So just below video container, we're going to get that video dash player value, and we're going to set a height and width. So we'll do height 100%, and then we'll just copy and paste that. We'll just do width, and then we'll just leave it at 100%. So I forgot the H there. So with that, we also want to make sure the video tag itself is styled. So we'll do video dash player, and then we'll get that video tag. Let's get this value, and then we'll just do border radius. So we want to make sure it doesn't overflow just in case. We also want to make sure that that's cut off. Okay, so let's try this one more time. So we added a height and width to this video player. Let's make sure that that's saved. So now when we actually add that item to the DOM, we should see it. Okay, so here we go. If I refresh that again, we got access to the camera. It takes a second, and there we are. So that looks good. We're actually able to display our stream. So if I add in another tab here, let's go ahead and load that up. We're also going to see that video stream, but the two users can't see each other. So we want to start adding that in next here. So what I want to do is actually hide this display, because eventually we're going to be able to click on these frames right here and add whatever frame that we clicked on to this big stream here. So let's go back into room.css, and for the stream box, at this point, let's just do display none, and then it's going to look a little bit better. And there we go. So let's just go ahead and move on to the next step. Let's go back into the code. So for this next step, what we're going to want to do is actually publish our stream and then create a function that's going to handle the event whenever another user publishes a stream. So right now, we're simply taking our local track and we're playing it, but we're the only ones that can see it. So we need to publish this track to the channel. And then anytime another user joins and publishes their track, we're going to need this function to run as like a side effect and then take that track from that user and display it into our stream. So this is how we're going to get remote users and view them inside of our browser here. So let's go ahead and create the function that's going to handle this. So this will be handle user published. So we'll create the function. Let's make sure it's an async function. And for the actual parameters, we are going to get the user value. So the actual tracks here from the user, and then the media type. So media type here. And this function is going to run as a side effect. So what we're going to do is go ahead and place this function inside of the join room init. So we're going to create like an event listener, and this is going to take this client object. Then we have an event listener, so we can go ahead and call on user dash published. So anytime a user publishes, we're going to listen for that, and we're going to call handle user published. So this is the function that's going to trigger whenever a user publishes. Now let's go ahead and actually build out the function, and then we're going to publish our track, and we'll actually see this in effect. So when a user publishes, what we're going to do is go ahead and call remote users. So this object right here that we set up right here, we're going to go ahead and get that, and we're going to add the user to this track. So we'll go ahead and call user.uid, so we get that user's UID, and then we'll just throw in the entire user object. Now, once we add that user to the list of remote users, or I guess this key value store of remote users, we're going to go ahead and subscribe to that user's track, so we can call client.subscribe. And then for this, we're going to subscribe to the user, and then we'll just throw in the media type right here. So we're going to subscribe to that user's track, and then what we're going to do next here is create a player for that user. And this player will be the exact same player that we have right here. So let's copy this value right here. Let's paste that in, and we are going to need to update a few things here. So let's just go ahead and change this UID to be the UID from the user that was just added here. So we'll just change this to user.uid, and we'll do the same here. We'll just do user.uid. So we have the player, then we also need to append that to the DOM. So let's just grab this, we'll bring this down here, paste that in, we'll fix the indentation, and there we go, we just added the player. Now, when we add a new player, we also want to make sure that this player doesn't already exist in the DOM, just so we're not having duplicates. So let's go ahead and actually make a query for this player by the user container, and then if this player doesn't exist, then we'll add it. So let's go ahead and remove this value right here. So we'll remove the let right there, and we'll actually set the variable up here, and we'll just do document.get element by ID. We'll just take all of this in right here. Let's go ahead and copy that. Let's use backticks right here, paste that in, and then we'll just ask a question here. So we'll just say if the player is equal to null. So if it doesn't exist, let's go ahead and create a new one. So we'll just finish that statement here, and we'll just copy all of this and bring this in here. So that's just making sure that we don't have any duplicates. And I know it's a little bit repetitive, and now I'm just copying and pasting a bunch of stuff. So we check if the player exists. If the player doesn't, we just go ahead and set this value, grab that element, and append it to the DOM. So we add the player to the DOM, but now we need to actually play that track. So let's go ahead and check the media type. So we're gonna have two media types come through. We're gonna have an audio track and a video track here. So let's go ahead and first check the media type. We'll just do if media type is equal to video. Then what we'll want to do here is go ahead and take that user object, access to video track parameter, so video track, and then we'll just call the play method here. And in here we'll use backticks, and we're just going to append that video tag to the user dash and then the ID value here. So this is the same exact thing that we did right here for the local track, where we actually create a video tag and then append it to this tag right here into this div. So we're doing the same thing for the remote user. At this point, we just call user.videotrack and then play. So we also have the media type of audio. So we'll just go ahead and get that. We'll do if media type is equal to audio. Then let's just go ahead and play the audio. At this point, we're not doing anything with the DOM. So we'll just do user.audioTrack. And then we'll just call .play. And that'll just play the audio. Okay, so we have the listener for, or the event listener for the user published event. And now what we need to do is go ahead and actually publish our local tracks here. So whenever a user joins the room, we call join stream, and we have our local track. So the last thing we need to do here is actually publish that track. So we'll just go ahead and call await. Then we'll do client.publish. And we need to specify the tracks that we want to publish here. So we're going to throw in an array so we can publish multiple tracks. And at this point, we're going to publish our local tracks audio first. So audio is index 0. So we're publishing the audio track. And then we're going to publish the video track right here. So we're going to do index 1 for video and then audio right here. So we're publishing those. And this function right here is what's going to trigger this event listener. So whenever we call publish, every other user inside of the stream is going to go ahead and trigger this and then call handle user published. And that's what's going to trigger this function right here. So let's go ahead and test this out. I'm going to save it. We'll open up the browser here. Okay, so we see our track in here. And at this point, what I'm going to do is go ahead and just copy and paste it. And we're just going to go ahead and back to this user, and we're going to wait a second. And here we go. Now we see another track. And for the remote user, we also see this track. So I'm using the same webcam. If I go ahead and actually publish more, we're going to see 3 right here. So those events are firing off and everything's working good. We're actually seeing remote users here. Now we do have one issue, and that is, I actually hear an echo right now, so I can actually get my headphones and bring that to the speaker. I don't know if you can hear that. So essentially, whenever a user leaves, we have nothing that tears down this element from the DOM. So right now, if I close this one out, we're going to see this go black here because the video tag is no longer functioning. It's not published anymore. And if I close this one out, here we go. Now we just see ourselves. So we need to handle that event of not only publishing a track, but also removing that track from the DOM whenever a user leaves. So we're listening for the publish event. Let me just refresh this so we're the only ones in here. Okay, there we go. So we're listening for that event, but now we want to go ahead and just remove that element. So we're going to add in another function here. So we'll just go ahead and create a handle user left function. So we'll do handle user left. So that's going to be the name of the function. It'll be an async function. And at this point, we're just going to throw in the user object here. So we know what user left. And we need to add in an event listener. So let's go ahead and actually go up here to the join room init function. We'll copy this, and the client object has another event that we can listen for. And at this point, this is going to be for user left. So whenever a user leaves, we're going to call handle user left. So this is the function that's going to respond to that leave event. Now let's go ahead and bring this down here and let's finish up this function here. So in this function, what we want to do is first delete the user from that object of users. So we're going to go into remote users and we're just going to go ahead and delete user.uid. So that's the key. We're going to remove that user. And let's see, what did I not do here? Oh, I didn't finish the arrow function. Okay, so there we go. So we're deleting the user, and then we just want to go ahead and remove that user's frame from the DOM. So we'll do .get element by ID, and we're just going to go ahead and get the user-container. We'll throw in user.uid. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and give this a test. So we'll save that. We'll go ahead and add in another user, give it a second to load this user in. We'll add in a second and then a third. Okay, so we publish the users. If I go back to this first one and close this out, here we go. Oh, I forgot to call remove. Okay, so give me a second. We'll just do remove. Okay, so we're simply removing that element from the DOM. Let's go ahead and save that. We'll add another user here. And if I click X here, there we go. And there we go. So now we can publish a track and we can also remove that track. And if I join with another user, it'll obviously do the same thing. So the next thing I want to do here is focus on actually presenting these video frames into the big stream here, or into the big frame. So right now it's hidden, but at any point, let's say a user is sharing their screen, or I just want to focus on, let's say, user number 2 here that's talking. I want to be able to click on this user, add them to that big frame, and then switch between which users in that frame, along with also removing them. So let's go ahead and actually move on to the next section. And before we get started with that, I want to go ahead and actually remove some of these containers here. So we'll just remove container 3 and 4. So I just wanted to make sure that whenever we add a new frame into the DOM, we're not having all of those placeholder elements taking up the space, so we can actually see it. So that just looks a little bit cleaner. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step here. So we'll close out room.css and let's just open up room.js. So anything that has to do with the DOM and click functionality, we'll leave that in room.js. Anything to do with the Agora RTC SDK, we'll leave in room_RTC. So let's keep these files separate. And in here, let's just go ahead and scroll down from all of these events here, and let's just set some variables to start with. And then we're going to build out a few functions that will actually handle the click events for any time we click on one of those video frames. So the first thing I want to do is actually go into room.html, and I just want to query all the stream. Actually, let's see, I want to query the stream box right here, so I can actually add event listeners to that and append elements to this div right here. And I want to get all of these video containers so we can add in click events to them. So let's go ahead and call this display frame. I guess that's the most descriptive thing I can think of, is just the display frame. So it's the one that's going to display the main element. So we'll just do document.get element by ID, and this will be stream underscore box, or double underscore. So then we want all the video containers. So we'll just do video frames, and this will be document.get element by class name, get elements by class name. So elements by class name, and we're just going to get all the video containers, double underscore container. Let's make sure that's the name of the class here. So that's all of these containers. So that's going to be an array of HTML elements, or a collection. And then the next thing I want to do is set a variable for the user ID in display frame. So anytime we click on an element, I want to know what user is actually inside of this display frame, because we're going to take this element, put it into this box right here, and we just want to know what the current ID is. And there's a few reasons for that, but before we have a user in there, this value is going to be null. So we're going to leave it as blank, but at some point we want to know which item is actually in there. So now what we'll want to do is go ahead and create a function that will be in charge of expanding a video frame and adding it inside of this div right here whenever we click on it. So this will be called expand video frame. We'll go ahead and create the arrow function, pass in the event here. So finish up the arrow function. And essentially what we're going to do in this function is we're going to first check if we have any item inside of the stream box. If there is one, we'll remove it and add in the new frame that we just clicked on. And then we'll change the actual styling of this stream box. So right now in the CSS, you don't see it because we have it as display none. So this function will be in charge of actually changing that styling and then moving an element in or out of that stream box. So let's go ahead and actually first go ahead and get that display frame. We'll just do display frame dot style dot display, and we'll just do block. Let's see if I can write display here. So we'll do display and then block. So first we'll make sure that we can actually see that element. So if I save this, let's actually go ahead and add the event listener to all these video frames. So we'll loop through all the video frames. So we'll just do for, finish up this for loop. We'll do let I is equal to 0. Then we'll get the length of video frames. I'm one of those people that writes my for loops like this, so I like to keep it old school. So while the video frames is less than I, let's go ahead and increment I. And let's just go ahead and add the event listener. So we'll get each video frame, get the index right there to add event listener, and we're just going to say on click. Let's go ahead and expand the video frame. Okay, so this right here is actually going to add the event listener only to the frames that were already there. So I'll show you what I mean by this. So when we're here, if I click on this event, it's going to expand that video frame. That's all the function does. But if I refresh that and I wait for a new video frame to be added, if I click on this, nothing's going to happen because this item was just added and that event was not added to it yet. So we'll actually deal with that in a second. So right now, only 1 and 2 right here can actually expand that frame. So let's continue here. So we're going to call expand video frame. And the first thing I want to do is check if we have an item in here. So right now we're just displaying it as block. That's actually going to be the next step here. So let's go ahead and check for a child element. We'll just do child is equal to display frame. And we'll just do dot children. Get the first index. So we want the first child, which would be that video frame. We'll say if there currently is a child. So we'll get the child. And we're just going to take that child, take them out of this stream box right here. So we'll remove them from this element and we want to stick them back into the streams container. So we'll say if child, let's go ahead and do document dot get element by ID. We'll grab the streams double underscore container. Make sure there's an S right here. So it's streams, not stream. I know we have 2 IDs here, so I want to make sure that, or 2 IDs that have a very similar name. So I want to make sure we don't confuse that. Yeah, so we have stream container and streams. We're adding that to here. So we're taking that streams container and we're just going to do dot append child. So this function will take that child element and add them back into the stream, so it'll remove it from that main frame. Now, what I want to do next here is go ahead and take the current item that we clicked on and add them into that main stream box. So we're basically going to reverse what we just did right here. So at this point, we remove any item inside of that stream box down to stream containers, but the current item needs to be placed into that main stream box now. So we'll just do display frame dot append child. So we're going to call this function again. We'll go ahead and get e dot current target. And I know sometimes e dot target works, but for some reason it was clicking on the actual video tag and it was placing the wrong element in here. So if you want to follow along exactly, make sure you don't get an issue, go ahead and just do e dot current target. So we're taking the current element and we're adding this into that display frame. And what I also want to do is go ahead and take that current user in display, or that user's ID, and we'll just do e dot current target dot ID. So now we know what item is in this display frame. So let's go ahead and actually test this out here. We'll just bring this down here. Remember, the actual video frame that gets added, this will not work because we have not added the event handler. But if I click on 1, here we go, we see 1, and don't worry about the size here. We'll rework all of that out. So if I click on 2, it's going to take 1, bring them down here, and it's going to place 2 in here. Now if I click on that, or if I click on 1, it's just going to keep changing. So those items keep flip-flopping. We're removing an item and adding 1 in. So the next thing I want to do here is actually shrink these items right here. So whenever we have an item inside of this main frame, I want to make sure that all these items in here are set to 100 pixels in height and width, just so they have some room there, and it looks a little bit better, I think, that way. So we'll just go ahead and create another for loop here. So as we expand an item, we're just going to loop through all the items here. So let's copy and paste this loop right here, just so I'm not typing that out again. And we're just going to do video frames I, and we'll just do dot style dot height, not scroll height, but height, like that. And that's going to be equal to 100 pixels. And we're going to do the same to the width here. So we'll just do width, and there we go. So the only issue that occurs here is the fact that we don't want the main item in that display frame to have the height and width of 100 pixels. We actually want to expand it and make it large. So these are shrinking, but we want to make sure this item stays big here. So let's go ahead and add in a quick question. We'll just do if the current item in the display frame, so we want to check this condition. Let's actually copy and paste this into the if statement. So we're just going to go ahead and say if the video frames ID, so the current ID value, if this is not equal to the user ID in display frame, the value that we just set right here, then go ahead and change the height and width. So let me go ahead and just try this again. We'll click on 1, 2, and there we go. So right now the height and width is going to be like that because it actually adjusted it because we clicked on it at some point. But if I click on it for the first time, 1 stays the same while these are actually shrunk here. So let's go ahead and actually add this to this video frame now. So we'll go ahead and add this event. So we're going to take this expand video frame event. We'll bring this into room_RTC here. And we're just going to call this as we append this item to the DOM here. So we're just going to go ahead and grab the currently newly added item here. So on handle user published. Actually, let's do this at join stream here. Let's start here. So let's go ahead and grab this. We'll just do document.get element by ID. We'll just get the user container UID. And we'll just do add event listener on click, and we'll just do expand video frame. So I just pasted that in. So once we add the item to the DOM, go ahead and add the event listener. So let's copy this entire method right here, and let's just bring this, or line of code, and let's bring this down into handle user publish. So anytime a new user publishes their stream, let's go ahead and add this down here too. So we want to make sure every single user has that. Now at this point, we're gonna have to do user.uid, and I think we're good there. Okay, so let's go ahead and just try this out. Okay, so when a new video frame gets added, we can click on this. There we go. Click on 1, 2, and then that frame. And let's just go ahead and add another user. Now we can just switch between these two. You can see that's changing, and all of that's working. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. So the issue that we're currently having is the fact that that video frame is actually small because we're not adjusting the size of that container. So let's go into room.css, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and find the stream box here. So let's see, we'll go into stream box, and I just want to make sure that the current video container that has the height and width set right here, we're just going to take this value, and we're going to say anytime this item is inside of stream box, let's go ahead and do this. We'll do stream _box. Let's go ahead and also style that stream box's video container. So at this point, let's just go ahead and set the border to 2 pixels solid, and we'll just change the color to black. So we'll just do, I believe we can do 0, 0 like that, or 000, and that'll work. We're gonna set the border radius to 0. So we just wanna change that, make sure it's not a circle anymore. And we're also gonna set the height of 100% or to 100%, and we'll just use the important property there, and we'll do the same for width. So 100%, and we just want to make sure that this happens so it overrides what we currently have there. Important, I don't know why I can't spell that word. Okay, so we set the height and width, and that's it for this box right here, but we also want to style the actual video tag here. So we'll just do stream _box, and we'll just do video, and the video tag doesn't have a height and width. So we're just going to make sure that the border radius is set to 0 like that. So we want to make sure that it's not a circle once it's added. So let's go ahead and test this out. So we'll just go ahead and click on this. Actually, if I just refresh it, there we go. So give it a second, let that video frame come in. Then we'll click on 2, this one right here, and that looks a lot better. So now we're actually able to display the frame and style these elements. So that looks a lot better. So we still have a few things that we want to fix up here, and one of those issues is the fact that if we've clicked on one of these video frames, when that frame expands, all these other streams right here actually get shrunk down into these small circles here. So they expand and shrink, but what happens is if we're currently displaying someone in that main stream, anytime we add in a new user, that user stream by default is going to be set to a height and width of 300 pixels because we haven't restyled that new user. We've only restyled what we currently have here. So I'll show you what I mean by this. So let's go ahead and add in a new user. And when this user is added, automatically their frame is set to 300 pixels in height and width. Now, when I click on it, it does adjust it, so that's fine. Everything works out. But we want to make sure that anytime we handle that user joined event, we fix that issue here. And we also want to fix the issue of the current user in that frame leaving. So let's go ahead and refresh everything, and we'll go back in here inside of room_rtc.js, and we're just going to bring this down into handle user published event. So we're going to take that video player, we're going to check if it exists, we're going to add it to the DOM, and then we're going to run one more check. So the check we want to look for is to see if we currently have any styling to that display frame. So we're going to do display frame. I want to make sure I'm saying that right. So if we currently have a style to that display property, then that means we're currently displaying a user there. So let's go ahead and just change that. So we'll take this player right here and we'll just do player.style.height, and this is going to be set to 100 pixels. So we'll do 100 pixels, and we'll just do the same for the width. So we'll just copy and paste that, and this will be the width here. So when they join, if we're currently displaying someone, set them to 100 pixels of height and width. So let's go ahead and do this. We'll actually display this user. We'll display another user. Now when this user joins, automatically this is set to 100 pixels in height and width. So we checked, is someone in this frame? Change that styling. Now for this other user, because there's no one being displayed, this is going to stay at 300 pixels. Now I want to show you another issue that's going to occur here. So we're going to have to kind of like bounce around here and fix up a few things. So right now, this is that remote user, and this is the user in this tab. So if I click on this user and they're displaying their stream, if I close this user out so they leave the stream, what's going to happen here is automatically that video tag is going to be removed, but that frame is still going to be displayed out there. So we want to make sure that we read which user left, and if they were the ones that were currently displaying their stream, we just want to resize all of these back to their original 300 pixels in height and width, and just make sure that's fixed up. So let's go ahead and just move back in here. So this is going to be inside of handle user left right here. So whenever a user leaves, let's go ahead and see if they were the user that was currently inside of that main frame. So we're just going to go ahead and check what that ID was. So we'll do if the current user ID in display frame. So we're going to get that ID, and we're just going to check if that was this current user. So we're going to get this entire ID. So we're about to remove it, or I guess we did just remove it, but we also want to know, do we need to hide that main frame? So if that's the case, if they were the ones in there, let's just go ahead and do display frame dot style dot display, and we're just going to set this to null. So we're going to remove any styling that they have there. And the next thing we want to do is make sure that all the video containers that were there all get resized back to 300 pixels. So I just want to show you issue by issue. Okay, so this is that remote user. When they leave, there we go, we changed the styling, but these right here should be set back to 300 pixels. So we just want to go ahead and resize those next. So we're going to go ahead and remove that main frame. Then we're just going to go ahead and get the video frame. So we already have this value stored right here. So we'll just get all the video frames. Actually, I'm going to query it again because I just realized I need to get the new video containers. So let's just grab this, and we'll bring this back into handle user left. We're going to get all those video frames. We're going to make that query again, and we're just going to loop through those video frames and resize them. So we'll do let I is equal to 0, and then we'll do video frames dot length. We'll get all the video frames that are currently in there. If this is less than I, increment I, and let's see, we'll just do video frames, get each size dot style dot height, and this is going to be set back to 300 pixels. So that means the main user left. We're just going to reset everything back to normal. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this out. So we'll just go ahead and open this up. We'll make ourselves the main frame. We'll add in a few new users. Now I'm just going to select this newly added user, and if they leave, I think it's this user. There we go. We just reset those video frames, and that looks good. Now if we open one of these up, I don't know which user's what right now, so I think this is this remote user. Click on that. There we go. That looks much better. So we're actually resizing everything and just kind of moving things around. Now if someone's in this main frame, I want to be able to click on this and actually shrink the frame down and set it back to where we were. So I want to have the ability to remove frames without always having somebody in this main stream. So once we finish this little section up, we're going to work on actually changing this video quality right here, and then we'll just move on to the next step. So let's go ahead and go back into room.js here, and we're going to create a function to hide a stream here. So let's just do hide display frame. So not a stream, but the main frame here. And we're just going to go ahead and make an arrow function. And what I want to do here is set user in display frame. I want to set this to null, so I just want to reset this value. Then I want to go ahead and get the display frame. We'll just do .style dot display, and this is going to be set to null also. So we want to set these values, and we also need to grab the current element in there. So we want to see if there's a current element in that main frame, which there is going to be if we're hiding it. So we're just going to copy and paste all of this. We're going to take this child, and I guess we don't need to ask this condition because there is a child in there. That's why we're hiding it. And we're just going to add them to the streams container. So we're going to move them down. Now, at that point, I just want to go ahead and loop through all those video frames. Let's just copy this right here inside of handle user left. And I just want to resize all those frames back to 300 pixels. So we're just going to loop through all of them, resize them, and that's it for the function. So the last thing we need to do here is go ahead and do display frame dot add event listener, and we'll just listen for a click event, and we'll just do hide display frame. Okay, so let's check this out. Let's make sure it's all working. So we're going to open this up. We'll open up a user. We'll add in a second user, and if we're in here, okay, so it restyled that. Let's see, why is that user not showing? Actually, we're having an issue here. So let me try this one more time. So I'll click on this user, we'll remove them, and we'll add them again. That might have just been a lag here. Okay, there we go. So it's all good. So if I click on this, I want to hide it and resize it. So I can go ahead and toggle all these users. I can go between them, and I can also hide a user and reset all of this. So that looks good. I want to go ahead and just remove those placeholders right here. We can remove 1 and 2. I just wanted to keep that there just to work on that toggle functionality. So let's actually remove the second frame. There we go. So that's all in there now. And now let's go ahead and move on to setting the video quality here. So right now, if you look at this frame, it doesn't really look that good. And if we actually look at the settings here, so let's just go ahead and minimize that. It's a little bit blurry here. If we actually go to inspect, you'll actually be able to see that video size here. So right now the video dimensions are 640 by 480. And there's a lot we can do here. We can actually set the frame rate, set the actual dimensions here. So for now, I'm just going to set the dimensions of this and actually make this frame a little bit bigger so it'll look nicer. So you can actually read about how you can do this in the documentation if you want to really advance from here and actually set a lot of like really advanced settings. But for now, let's just go ahead and go back into create camera and microphone tracks. So this is where we want to set it. And because we're setting microphone and camera tracks, we can actually set 2 encoder configs here. So we can do one for the audio. We're not going to work on that right now, so let's leave that as an empty object. And then we're also going to set the encoder config for the video. So the audio is the first object, the video will be the second. So once we have this object, let's go ahead and add in encoder config. Okay, so let me actually move a few things out of here so we can see this. So we'll do encoder config, and then this will be an object right here, so we'll move that down. So remember, we have 2 objects and then an object inside of the encoder config. Just make sure you set that up correctly. And we're going to set up a width here. Now, for the width, we're also going to throw in an object here. And we're just going to set the minimum frame here. So let's see, we'll do min. And for this value, let's just go ahead and set 640 for the minimum width. Then we'll just go ahead and set our ideal width. So this is what we always want it to be. We'll just do 920. And then the max width will also just be 920. Okay, so once we have the width, we're just going to go ahead and move down. We'll set a height here, and we'll create another object. We'll also set the min, and this will be 480, and then the ideal will be, let's see, we want to have this at 1080. So we'll do 1080, and then the max will also be 1080. So this is completely up to you. I just want to show you where we can actually adjust this, and I just want to make sure our video quality is a little bit better. So an object here, this wraps it, everything looks good. I think we're all ready to go, and let's take a look at this. So now if I open this up, look at the video quality, it's a lot bigger. So if we do a before and after, you can see the frame right here. You can see the picture frame, the outside, and then you can see almost the entire bed. But if I remove this, we're going to see all that shrink and the quality will actually go away. So let's go ahead, remove it, save it, and take a look at this again. I'll extend it, and there we go. So it's cut off, so you can actually see that adjustment and the quality itself actually changed. So I'll just go ahead and undo that, save it, and there we go. So now what I want to do is actually go on and move on to setting up the control buttons for muting our mic, turning our camera on and off, and that sort of stuff. So all that functionality that you see on the bottom right here, all these controls. So let's go ahead and start adding some functionality here. So we're going to start by going into room.html, and I'm going to change these buttons here. So right now, if we have a class of active on a button, it's going to be purple here. So by default, when we first join, I want to make sure that our camera and audio is active. So let's set that to true, and then we're going to add in some custom IDs. So we'll take this class of active, move that to this button, and this is going to be our camera button. So we'll do camera dash BTN, and we'll just copy this, bring this down here. This will be the mic button. So we're going to add in some event handlers to these, so we just want to make sure we have a way to identify them. This will be screen, and this button right here will be leave. So we're not going to add the class of active to these because they're not going to be active right away, and this button eventually will be read, the leave button, so we'll just call that leave button here. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the next step here. So what I want to do is first toggle the camera. Actually, I was going to toggle the mic first, but I actually want to toggle the camera so you can see it, because when I toggle the mic you might not hear it. I'll have to just put in my headphones, see if I hear an echo, and we'll test it that way. So let's start with the visual part first, and then we'll adjust it. So to do this, let's go back into room_RTC. So we'll close out room.js here, and I'm just going to move down to the very bottom here, and we'll create that function here. So we're going to create a function called toggle camera. So in toggle camera, we're going to throw in the event here. We'll finish up the arrow function here, and we're also going to make sure it's an async function here. So I always like to do that just in case I need to use a wait somewhere. Okay, we've got the async function, and let's just talk about the logic here. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and just get the button. So we'll just do e.currentTarget. So that's the button that we clicked on, so current target. So we'll get the button, and then I also want to set the class to it. So I want to adjust the actual active class. So if we are currently active, we'll remove the class of active, meaning we're turning it off, and then we'll just flip it and we'll change it up based on what the current status is. So to check if we're currently muting the mic, so muting is a word that we can actually use for the camera itself. So it makes more sense for the mic, but you can actually mute the camera, which means it'll turn off the camera stream. So for this, we're going into local tracks, and the camera is index 1. So we're going to go ahead and say if index 1, so the video, we're just going to go ahead and do if it's muted. We'll check the status of muted. Then we'll just go ahead and unmute it. So we'll just do await. We'll do local tracks 1. So we're grabbing the video track, and we'll do set muted. So this is how we can actually change the status, and we're just going to do false. So if it's currently muted, we're going to unmute it. So false meaning it's going to turn on the camera. With this, we also want to change the class of the button. So we're going to do button.classList.add, and we're just going to add the class of active. So this will make sure the button's purple, and then we'll just add in else. And in this section, all we're going to do is simply invert this right here. So we're going to set muted to true. That means that if we are currently muted, then we're just going to go ahead and, or if we're not muted, we are going to mute it. So we're going to set muted to true. And we're just going to remove the class of active. So that's going to change the color of the button. So that's all we need to do there. I'll save that, and then the next step here would simply be to add in an event handler. So let's just go ahead and do document.getElementById. We'll get the camera button, camera-btn, and then we'll just do .add event listener on click. So when we'll click the button, let's go ahead and toggle the camera. So let's go ahead and test this out. So we'll open this up here. So I'm going to bring that into frame. We'll click it. So right now you see that the purple was removed and you don't see the camera. If I toggle that again, purple's added and it just switches. So perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. So to do this for the mic, it's actually very easy. It's the same exact function. So we're just going to update this. So we're going to take our toggle camera function, and I'm just going to paste this above. So we have toggle camera, and this one's going to be toggle mic. So we'll change this to toggle mic. Now the only functionality that we're going to change here is we're going to get index 0. So index 0 in local tracks is the audio. So we're going to go ahead and check the same thing. If the audio is currently muted, we'll set it to false, meaning we're unmuting it, and so on. And we're just simply updating the class. And all we have to do here is simply add in the event listener now. So we'll bring this down here, and let's just go ahead and update this to listen for the mic button. Click right here. And then we're just going to do toggle mic for this one. Okay, so one toggles the camera, one toggles the mic, and I'm going to need to throw in my headphones here so I can hear the echo. It won't actually capture it in a screen recording. So let's give this a second, and we'll just click. Actually, here I need to add in a second user. Okay, now I hear the echo, and if I mute it and then unmute it, Perfect. I can hear the echo, it's all working, and then I can also toggle the mic. Now, one thing I want to work on here is whenever this mic is toggled, see this black frame right here? I want to make sure that we actually have some kind of background so it looks a little bit better than just having it black. So if we have a bunch of people in the stream, let's say they're just muting their camera, I want to make sure something is visible because it looks like something's broken. And actually at this point, it does seem like something's broken here. I don't know what's going on here. I'll fix this background first and then I'll see what's going on in that section. Okay. So right now, let's go ahead and unmute the camera. There we go. Then we mute it again. And all right, perfect. So to do this background right here, what I'm going to do is go ahead and look into my images folder. So we have this logo right here. So this is the Mumble logo. It's actually the same logo that we're seeing up here. So this logo that we have in the header bar, we're just going to set that to the background color. Now it can't see it because I'm not sure why I can't see it, but I guess that's irrelevant. It's there. Let's just go ahead and actually go into our CSS, and we're going to go into our video container. Now for this, all we're going to do is set a background image to that video container. So we'll just do background dash image, and the actual image, we just need to set the URL. So we'll do URL, and we're just going to point this to the images folder. So we'll do slash images, and we're just getting the logo.png. Okay, so we'll save that, and if I go ahead and check this out, there we go. So we see a logo there and it's repeating. It doesn't look that good. So let's go ahead and just finish up the styling. So we're just going to go ahead and do background repeat, and we'll just do none for this, or no repeat. So we're going to make sure the image isn't repeating. And I also want to make sure it's centered. So let's center that in the middle. So we can just do background position, and this will be center. And I also want to set the background size. So we'll just do background size to 75 pixels. Let's just do 75 like that, and that should be good. Okay, so now when a user mutes their camera, we actually see something. So if I mute my camera on this side, this other user will see it, and then if we unmute it, there we go. So we both see the stream, and then when we mute, that's the output. So what happens when I click on this? So if I happen to click on that user, let's say this user mutes it. So if you mute it, this logo looks a little bit small, so let's go ahead and just make sure this is filled out to size. So we'll just go up to Streambox video container, and if the video container is in here, we'll just set the background size and make that a little bit bigger. Let's see, we'll do background size, and let's just set this to 300 pixels. I think that should be a good size here. All right, so there we go. So if it's in here, it's large, and if I move it down, it's small down here. That's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. Okay, so I just took a few minutes and I tried to solve that issue that was occurring where when we started adding multiple video frames, it looks like some of the frames weren't being added, and I came to a few conclusions here, and I really don't think it was an issue. I think the problem was the fact that when the camera quality is so high, it's kind of overloading this camera right here. So that's kind of the theory, because when I went into this section right here, and I would highly recommend that if you're having this issue, test this out, and if you're still having it, let me know. Maybe we'll see it in the comment section. If I fix it at some point, we can try doing something else, and maybe I can add a fix for that. But when I removed this right here, and I just try to add on a bunch of streams, and I think I got up to like 15 streams, no issue occurred. It was only when I added in this quality right here. So when I set the height and width, I think what's happening is it's overloading the camera, and is just making it hard for the camera to actually load up in time, and it's breaking something. So I think that's the issue. Again, try just taking all of that out, testing it if you're having it, and if that doesn't fix it, then I'm not exactly sure what to do. We'll come up with a fix later. But it seems like it's only because I'm loading it all on one camera. So if you're working with remote users, it shouldn't really be an issue because they're loading up their own camera. So yeah, I think that's the only solution. We'll see kind of what happens here. I'm going to leave it at the high quality. If we see that issue, we're just going to assume that that's what it is, and we'll move on from there. Now, there was one issue that I saw. I noticed that whenever remote peers were being added, we have this function right here. Let's see, where was that? Inside of handle user published, I think. We were calling player.style, and I realized until this item is added to the DOM, we actually can't do this. So what we're going to do here is let this item be appended to the DOM, and then we're just going to go ahead and actually query and then update it. So we'll just call, let's see, what do I want to do here? I actually wrote this as a note. So we're going to go ahead and get this video frame. So we'll do video frame, and we'll do document.get element by ID, and we're just going to grab this item right here, and we'll throw that in. Just use the backticks, and there we go. So let me just comment this out real quick, and I'll show you what was happening. So essentially, when I expand the video frame, and if I add another user, we'll look at the console. This is the issue that I'm seeing. So let's add another user, and when it adds this user, it looks like it's saying no height for undefined or that type of property. Sorry, I hear an echo, so it's throwing me off, but essentially, we're not setting a height to a real element yet. So we're just gonna go ahead and query the video frame. Then we'll do video frame, and we'll just set the height and width to that. So let's go ahead and give this a test. So we're grabbing that new video frame that was being added and handle user published. And let's try that one more time. So I'll mute my mic, make this full screen, add another user. Actually, here, let me refresh it again, just so I see the latest console. And let's try this. So when I add this user, I think I'm good here. So yeah, I don't see any issues. So now we're actually able to query that item, and yeah, that just solves that. So I just wanted to fix those two issues. I'll try to fix bugs as I go, but also we'll try not to interrupt the video as I'm doing right now. I just want to make sure we catch everything. So the next thing I want to do actually is I want to go ahead and actually learn how to display our screen here. So very often you might be in a meeting. Let's say maybe you're using this as like a streaming platform. You want to be able to share your screen if you're playing a game or maybe coding. We want to be able to toggle this and actually see what's going on here. So let's go ahead and work on that. So at this point, inside of our room.html function, we have our screen button right here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a function, and we're going to go ahead and toggle that function, and that's actually going to request our screen, basically request access to see our screen. We'll select which screen we want to show, and then we're going to unpublish our video track and actually show that screen. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So we'll go into room RTC, and the first thing I want to do is set some parameters here, so some default values. So right here we have our local tracks, remote users. Let's go ahead and do local screen tracks. So we'll set something up for that, and at this point it's just going to be undefined. We don't have any screen tracks. Not everyone's going to want to share that. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and set a value called sharing screen, and this will just be set to false. So by default, until we share our screen, this value will be false, and we just want to make sure that we can check this if we need to. Now let's go all the way down to the bottom, and underneath toggle camera, what I'm going to do is create a function called toggle screen. So we'll do let toggle screen, and we'll make this an async function. Let's go ahead and add in our event, and I want to call the event listener right away. So let's copy and paste one of these here, and we'll just do screen button. We are going to toggle the screen whenever this is clicked. So when we click this button, what do we want to do? So right away, I want to make sure I can get a few buttons here. So we want to get the screen button. So we'll do screen button. That's going to be equal to e.currentTarget because that's the button that we clicked on. And then I also want to make sure that the camera button is hidden. So the only way to toggle the screen off is to actually click this again. So when we click this, I want this camera button to go away. We're going to unpublish the stream, and then only when we toggle this again do I want this camera button to actually appear. So we'll go back here, and we'll just do camera button, and this will be document.getElementById. We'll just do camera-btn. So we'll get both buttons, and let's go ahead and check a condition here. So we'll first check if we're sharing the screen. So we'll do if sharing screen, and I actually want to use the not operator because right away I want to see, if we're not currently sharing, I want to actually work on that functionality right away, which means that we're about to toggle that screen and share. So if we're not sharing, then let's go ahead and set sharing to true. That means that we're about to toggle it. So we'll first change that value, and then I want to change the button. So we'll go into our screen button, and we'll add in a class here. So we'll do screen button.add class list here, and we're going to set this to active. So we're going to go ahead and toggle this, and right after this I want to grab our camera button, and we're just going to go ahead and add in the class list of, or we're going to remove the class of item or active. So the reason why we're doing this is because when we toggle our screen off again and we want to turn our camera back on, by default I'm going to have the camera set as muted. So the audio and video will be muted. So if you want to turn off your screen, you're not surprised if your face all of a sudden just appears on camera. So I want to right away make sure that the camera is not active. So we'll also take our camera button and we'll do style.display, and we're going to display it as block here. So the reason why we'll display it as a block element is because if we are currently sharing, we're actually going to hide it. In fact, let me just go ahead and add this right now. We'll do else, and if we are currently sharing, let's go ahead and set this value. Let's see, I'm trying to remember how I wanted to do this. So we'll set sharing screen to false. So that means that we're actually turning off our screen. And one of the things that we'll do is camera button right here. We'll take this value and set it to none here. Okay, so that's kind of why I'm changing this up here. So the style here is going to be, actually this is going to be block. Okay, so there we go. So we're going to hide it up here, but then we'll show it down here. So there we go. Sorry, I confused myself up a little bit. I just wanted to make sure you understand what's going on with the buttons. So let's actually just try this. So right now, I guess nothing's going to happen. So if we want to share our screen, we're going to click that. Our screen will be toggled, and then when we click it again, we're going to turn this off and then turn the camera back on. So we'll work on that in a second. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, once we finish the button functionality here, is I want to go ahead and actually get our screen sharing track. I was about to say screen recording. Now to do this, we earlier used a function called get camera and audio tracks. Where was that? Let's see. Somewhere here. So I'm trying to reference this. So we got the microphone and camera tracks, but at this point we already have our audio tracks. So the only thing we need is a screen track. So we'll set this to await, and we're just going to call Agora RTC dot create screen video track. Okay. And what this is going to do is, again, it's going to toggle us and ask us what screen we want to share and if we approve, just like we would with the camera on the first time. Now, once we do that, let's go ahead and remove our current video track. So we're only going to be able to share our video or camera track. And sorry about the outside noise. Let's go ahead and do get element by ID. And we're just going to grab the user dash container. And we'll grab our current UID. So throw in the UID, and we're just going to remove it. So we'll remove the current item, our current video track, and then after that, we also want to automatically display our screen into the big frame. So we'll do style or display frame dot style, and we'll just do dot display, and this will be equal to block. So right away, if I'm sharing my screen, I want to be able to see if it all worked, if the users are seeing exactly what I want to show them, and so on. So I figured it'd be good practice to automatically display that. Now, after this, what I need to do is create a player, a video player. So let's just grab one of these. Let's take this value. We'll bring this down here. So we'll create the video player, and we'll have to actually initialize the variable here. So we'll get the player, and at this point, we're just getting our current UID. We don't need to get the user UID because that's for remote users. And let's see, the next thing I want to do is go ahead and add this player into the DOM. So we're going to display that main frame as a block here, and then we're just going to go ahead and do display frame, and then we'll just do dot insert adjacent HTML, and we'll throw in the player before end. We'll throw in the value like this, and we'll just call the player. Okay, so we're going to take this new video player, we'll throw it in there, and the next thing I want to do is go ahead and actually let's go ahead and add in the event handler. So when we add in this player into the video frame, automatically I want that frame to be clickable so a user can actually toggle that. So we want to add in that expand video frame function. So we'll just do document dot get element by ID, and we'll just go ahead and grab the current item. So get element by ID. Let's see. We'll just grab this user container. I guess I could have set that into a variable. So we'll grab that item, and we'll just do dot add event listener, and we'll just listen for a click event. And we're just going to go ahead and add in expand video frame. So every new item that we add in, we want to make sure it has that function. So in this case, we're just adding it to the new element that we just created. Okay, so once we do that, let's go ahead and set the user in display frame ID. So we want to go ahead and take this current ID, so we are now inside of that display frame, and we use this later to check certain values. So let's go ahead and again, we'll grab this value right here, so that UID of this video player. We'll set this value, and after that, I want to go ahead and actually play that screen track. So just like we did earlier with that screen or the video track, so we grab all, or we create the track, and then we call local tracks play, and it's going to go ahead and create a video tag and throw it into this frame. Well, we're going to do the same exact thing here. So once we set user in display frame, we're just going to go ahead and grab the local screen tracks. And at this point, we only have one track, so we don't have to do anything like index 1 or anything like that. We can just grab that local screen track and we'll just call play. And where do we want to add this? Well, we want to add this to user UID right there. So we want to throw that into this value. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and play it. So at this point, it's only going to play locally, but it won't work for remote users. But I just want to make sure that you can see what's going on here. So let's try this. So I talked a lot there. Let's go ahead and just try this. So when I click on this, it's going to go ahead and ask me, hey, what screen do you want to share? So let's go ahead and just share this current screen. And there we go. Now I am sharing the screen. So if I move all this code to my right screen, let's actually restart this. I'll share that right screen now. So we'll go in here and let's say we're asking somebody for some help. Well, we can just share our screen and the code's very small because that screen is not so zoomed in. And there we go. That's how we can do it. And then we're going to work on the toggle functionality. But what happens when another user joins here? So if another user joins, they're only going to see our video track and not our screen track. So we have to do a few things here. We are currently still only publishing our video track and not that screen track. So we need to unpublish our video track and republish the screen track. So this is only happening locally. So let's go ahead and fix this. So I'll drag my code in here. Let me go ahead and just refresh this again. Okay, give that a second. All right, so let's go back in here. And what I want to do here is go ahead and unpublish the current video track. So we're just going to call await. We'll call client.unpublish. So just like we have publish, now we can unpublish. And we're going to unpublish only the video track. So we're just going to call local tracks. And we're going to unpublish index 1. So we still want our audio track to be published because if we're sharing our screen, we still want people to hear us. So we're only unpublishing the video track. And the reason why we have to unpublish it is because right now with this client object, we can only publish one track at a time. Now there's ways to do two. We're not going to get into that. For now, we're just going to publish one track at a time. So that means we have to unpublish this local track. And then we're just going to go ahead and copy and paste this. Bring that down here. And we're going to call client.publish, and now we're going to publish our local screen tracks. So you see what we're doing here? We're unpublishing our video track because we can only publish one at a time, and we publish our local screen track. So our audio is still published. All right, so let's go ahead and save this now, and let's check out what this looks like for a remote user. So I'm going to drag this code into the right screen. If I toggle this, we'll go ahead and publish that, and now if I join as a remote user, I can see myself as a remote user. Now, if this user is sharing their video track or screen track, I can actually see that. There we go. So I can toggle myself and see this remote user's screen track. It's all working perfect. So now we're going to work with some untoggle functionality. So let's go ahead and continue here. So I'll close this out. We'll refresh this and we'll drag the code back in. I know it's kind of getting a little bit slower here, but I just want to make sure we go step by step and I explain everything. Now, at this point, if we do this, I just want to make sure that when we publish our screen, automatically it's going to get displayed in the big frame. So I want to make sure that we loop through all of our video frames and set those frames to a height and width of 100 pixels. So let me find where I did that. I'm just going to copy the code. Here we go. So we'll just grab all the video frames and let's just update them. So we'll take this and we'll bring this. Actually, let's see. That was setting them to 100 pixels. Here, let's just, we'll actually go back into room.js and we'll do this right here. So we'll take this entire for loop and we'll just bring this in. This is where I'm getting lazy and I'm copying and pasting code. So after we publish it, the last thing we're going to do is go ahead and loop through all our video frames. And at this point, let's just go ahead and set document, or actually we're going to set video frames is going to be equal to document.get elements by class name. And we're just going to grab video underscore container. Let me just move this over. Okay, so that looks correct here. Just want to make sure we're setting that. And there we go. Okay, so now we need to work on unpublishing and republishing our video track. So right away, if we're currently streaming, we're going to set sharing screen to false now. And we're still going to make sure that our camera track is, or now we're going to make sure our camera track is visible. After we do that, what I want to do is remove the current item. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this value right here. So we're just going to take that container again, and we're just going to remove it. So we're going to remove that current screen container. Once we do that, let's go ahead and unpublish our local screen track. So I'm going to take this unpublish method. We'll bring this down here, and now we're going to unpublish local screen tracks. So once we do that, I want to publish my video track. So I'm going to put all of that inside of its own function. Let's see, I'm seeing an issue here. I just want to make sure everything's working. Okay, it looks like I have this extra bracket right there. Okay, so at this point, we're just going to call a function called switch to, let's see, what I want to, switch to camera. So switch to camera. Okay, so we're about to call this, and I'm just going to comment this out because we're going to create it in a second. So let's go ahead and make this function right here next to join stream. So a lot of the functionality is going to be the same, so I'm just going to go ahead and make this underneath join stream. And let's just go ahead and create the function. So we'll just call this switch to camera. We'll make this an async function. All right, so what do we want to do in switch to camera? So the first thing I'm going to do is create another video player. So some of this functionality is getting redundant. So we're going to take this, bring this down here. We'll create the video player. Then I want to make sure that this is added to the DOM. So let's grab, grab one of these stream containers. So at this point, we'll just grab this right here, paste this in here, and I just want to make sure it's in the big frame so we can kind of notice that something happened. So let's just go ahead and do document.getElementById, and at this point, let's just go ahead and change this to display frame actually. So we'll take that display frame and we'll throw in our new player in there. So this is going to be that video stream. Once that's done, let's go ahead and mute our video and audio tracks. So just so nobody gets confused, let's call await local tracks here. And we're just going to take the index of 0. So that's going to be our audio track. We're going to do set muted. And we're just going to do true here. So we're going to mute ourselves immediately. Copy and paste that. We'll take the video track now. That'll also be true. And we're also going to take that mic and screen button and change up some of the classes here. So automatically we're just going to do document.getElementById. We'll take that mic button. So mic-btn, and then we'll just do .classlist.remove, and we're going to remove active. So we're going to be muted, so we want to make sure that the user knows that they're muted. Whoops, what did I do here? Okay, so we're muting or removing the class of active from the mic button, and we're also going to remove this from the screen button. So we want to adjust that. We'll remove the class of active there. That looks good. And now we just want to go ahead and play our local video track again. So we'll take this right here from join stream. We're going to do the same thing. And we're just going to go ahead and bring that down here. We're going to play it. And we're also going to publish it. We're going to publish our video track here. But we're going to do something a little bit different. So I'll bring this into that switch to camera function. And we've already published our audio track. So that's already published. It's muted at this point, but it is published. So let's go ahead and just remove this one. We don't want to republish that. That's going to cause an issue, so we're only publishing our video track. Okay, so kind of a lot of jumping back and forth there, but if anything, just go through that again. It should make sense. So now we have this switch to camera function, and we just want to go ahead and call that right here. So let's see if everything worked. I hope I don't have any issues. All right, so we'll save that, and let's go ahead and try this. So I'm actually going to take this code, move it to the right screen. Let's go ahead and here, let's actually refresh that, and I'm going to toggle this right away and see how it actually adjusts that frame. So we'll toggle this. We'll share this screen, screen number 2. Now I'm sharing the screen, and I want to toggle my camera again. So I'm going to click this. It's going to go ahead and deactivate my mic, my camera, and the screen. And now here we go. I can see myself. So you see how that republished the camera. So let's see what this looks like for a remote user. So right now, I'm currently showing my face. Let me mute the mic here so I don't hear that echo. So if I go ahead and share my screen again, so I can retoggle it, the remote user now sees this right here, the screen. And we'll go ahead and untoggle or toggle that again. And now we're just seeing that mic muted. So the local user just sees black. We can fix that later. I won't worry about that right now. But here we go. Now we're seeing that, and we can just keep going back and forth. So it's all working. Let's just double check. That's good. Awesome, awesome, and we are good to go. There we go. All right, so that is the screen sharing functionality. What are we doing next? So let's see. Let me go back into the code. Bring this over.